I am Margaret Hargrove and this house breathes my name. Every creak of the old wooden floors, every whisper of the wind through the ivy-covered walls, it all feels like a part of me. This estate in upstate New York has been in my family for generations, passed down like a sacred torch. After my husband passed away 12 years ago, I became its sole guardian, its keeper. It's not just bricks and mortar. It's my history, my identity. But lately I felt the weight of another presence here, a force that doesn't belong. When Edward came home last month with Clara on his arm, I knew something had shifted. He called her the love of my life. But to me she was an outsider wearing designer heels and carrying herself like she owned the place before even stepping foot inside. She smiled too much, laughed too loud, and shook hands with everyone as if she were auditioning for some invisible crown. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt at first. After all, she was my son's wife. But there was something about the way she looked at the chandeliers, the antique furniture, the sprawling gardens, as if she were already calculating their worth. Clara wasn't content to simply live here. She wanted to rule. Within days of moving in, she started rearranging things. First, it was small stuff, replacing my favorite floral cushions with sleek minimalist ones. Then came the bigger changes. A neon sign above the fireplace that read, "Live boldly," whatever that meant, and a juicer taking up space where my grandmother's silver tea set used to sit. Each alteration felt like a slap across the face. Edward didn't seem to notice, or maybe he chose not to. "Mom, you need to lighten up," he said one evening over dinner. "Clara's just trying to make the house feel more welcoming." Welcoming? To whom? The parade of strangers who suddenly appeared at our door? Yoga instructors, interior designers, caterers. They all came and went under Clara's watchful eye. And then there were the parties. Oh, the parties. Music blaring, drinks flowing, people spilling out onto the lawn like ants invading a picnic. My quiet sanctuary had turned into a circus and I couldn't escape the noise. It was during one of those late-night gatherings that I overheard Clara talking to someone in hushed tones near the library. Curiosity got the better of me, so I lingered by the doorway, pretending to admire the bookshelves while eavesdropping. What I heard made my blood run cold. "I think we can get top dollar for the East Wing," Clara said, her voice low but confident. "Once the renovations are done, investors will be lining up." Renovations? Investors? I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. She wasn't planning to preserve this house, she was planning to sell it off piece by piece. The next morning I confronted Edward. "Do you know what your wife is doing?" I demanded, shoving blueprints I'd found hidden in Clara's desk drawer into his hands. His face went pale as he scanned them. "Mom, you shouldn't have gone through her things," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "This isn't right, Edward." I snapped. "She's tearing apart everything we stand for." From that moment on, I declared war. Not openly, of course. That would have been too easy. No, I waged my battles silently, strategically. I started small, misplacing tools the contractors needed, unplugging appliances mid-use, leaving cryptic notes around the house. Some traditions deserve respect. At first, Clara dismissed these incidents as accidents or quirks of the old house. But soon she began to suspect. One afternoon, I caught her glaring at me from across the dining table, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You know," she said sweetly, though her eyes burned with accusation, "this house has a lot of charm, but it could use some modern updates. Don't you agree?" Charm? Updates? I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled back, equally saccharine. "Oh, absolutely," I replied. "But let's not forget what makes it special, dear." I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone, so I sought allies. Mrs. Pembroke, our loyal housekeeper of 30 years, was the first to join my cause. Over cups of chamomile tea in the kitchen, she confided in me about Clara's dismissive attitude toward the staff and her constant complaints about how outdated everything is. Then there was James, the young gardener with dirt-streaked hands and a mysterious past. When I approached him cautiously one evening, he nodded solemnly. "I don't trust her either," he admitted. Together we formed a secret alliance, gathering information and planting subtle obstacles in Clara's path. Still, guilt gnawed at me sometimes. Was I being too harsh? Too stubborn? But every time I doubted myself, I remembered the look in Clara's eyes when she talked about selling off parts of the estate. She didn't care about the memories embedded in these walls. To her, they were nothing more than assets to exploit. Everything changed the day I discovered Claire meeting with a real estate developer behind closed doors. Hidden in the shadows of the study, I listened as she discussed plans to sell not just the East Wing but also the orchard where Edward and I used to pick apples together. My heart shattered. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the halls, my mind racing. How could I stop her? Desperation led me to dig deeper into Clara's past. With James's help, I uncovered emails and documents revealing her true intentions. She wasn't just planning to flip the property for profit. She intended to use the money to fund her own business ventures, completely severing ties with the Hargroves once she had what she wanted. As I sat staring at the damning evidence spread out on my bed, a dark thought crept into my mind. If she thinks she can take this house from me, she's gravely mistaken. I became a ghost in my own home, a shadow moving silently through the halls, unseen but ever present. With the evidence against Clara tucked safely away, I began orchestrating small acts of sabotage. It started with simple things: loosening screws on the chandelier so it swayed precariously during one of her parties, hiding blueprints for the renovation under piles of old magazines, and accidentally unplugging the espresso machine she couldn't live without. Claire didn't suspect me at first. She chalked up the mishaps to bad luck or the quirks of an aging estate. But as the disruptions grew more frequent, her patience wore thin. One evening, after finding a delivery of marble tiles smashed to pieces outside the garage, she stormed into the living room where I was knitting by the fire. "This has gone far enough," she snapped, her hands trembling with anger. "Someone is deliberately trying to ruin this project, and don't think I don't know who's behind it." Her eyes locked onto mine, sharp and accusing. I smiled innocently, pulling another stitch tight. "Oh, darling, if only you'd listen to reason instead of chasing these ridiculous schemes. Maybe then you wouldn't have so many problems." Edward tried to mediate between us, though his efforts were clumsy and ineffective. He arranged a family dinner, just the three of us, at the grand dining table, hoping to ease tensions over roasted chicken and mashed potatoes. Instead, the meal turned into a battlefield of thinly veiled insults and passive-aggressive remarks. "You're clinging to the past, Mom," Edward said gently, though his tone carried a hint of frustration. "This house needs new life. Clara's ideas could save it." "Save it?" I shot back, setting down my fork with a clatter. "Is that what you call tearing it apart? Selling its soul for profit?" Clara leaned forward, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Margaret, no one's taking anything from you. We're just making sure the house stays relevant. Don't you want it to thrive?" I stared at her, bile rising in my throat. Thrive? This house had thrived long before she ever set foot inside it. Still, I forced myself to nod stiffly, pretending to agree, for Edward's sake. If he thought we were calling a truce, let him believe it. It would buy me time. James proved invaluable in uncovering more about Clara's plans. Late one night, while most of the household slept, he snuck into Clara's office and retrieved files detailing her meetings with investors and developers. Among them was a letter from a prominent real estate firm praising her vision for transforming the estate into a luxury retreat, but also hinting at potential legal hurdles due to zoning laws. Armed with this information, I devised a plan. If Clara thought she could outsmart me, she was wrong. I enlisted Mrs. Pembroke's help in planting doubts among the staff. Whispers spread quickly. "Did you hear? They say Mrs. Clara's deals aren't exactly legal." Though unsubstantiated, the rumors began to chip away at her authority. Meanwhile, I worked on Edward, subtly reminding him of the estate's history and the sacrifices our family had made to keep it intact. "Your father would never have approved of this," I told him one evening, watching his expression soften. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Things came to a head during a particularly disastrous event, a charity gala Clara hosted to showcase the renovated West Wing. Guests mingled beneath glittering lights, sipping champagne and admiring the modern art installations Clara had commissioned. To anyone else it might have looked like a triumph, but I saw cracks forming beneath the surface. Halfway through the evening, the power went out. The generator failed, plunging the room into darkness. Panic rippled through the crowd as servers stumbled around with trays of hors d'oeuvres, and guests fumbled for their phones to light the way. Clara stood frozen near the stage, her face pale with humiliation. When the lights finally flickered back on, chaos erupted. Several guests complained about the lack of preparation, while others discovered water stains on the freshly painted walls. Clara accused the contractors of shoddy workmanship, but I knew better. Those water stains? Courtesy of a strategically placed sprinkler system malfunction I had orchestrated days earlier. As the party dissolved into disarray, Clara turned to me, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You did this," she hissed. "Admit it." I met her gaze steadily, my lips curving into a faint smile. "Prove it." The climax arrived sooner than I expected. Clara decided to host one final event. A press conference announcing the estate's transformation into a luxury boutique hotel. Reporters from local newspapers and lifestyle magazines filled the ballroom, cameras flashing as Clara took center stage. She spoke eloquently about her vision, painting herself as a visionary determined to breathe new life into a historic property. Edward sat beside her, beaming with pride. But as Clara reached the peak of her speech, I stepped forward, clutching a folder filled with documents. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "But there's something everyone should know." Gasps rippled through the audience as I revealed Clara's secret dealings with the developer, including falsified permits and illegal land use agreements. Clara's face drained of color as reporters bombarded her with questions. Edward looked utterly bewildered, torn between disbelief and betrayal. For a moment I felt victorious. Justice had been served, or so I thought. But Clara wasn't about to go down without a fight. As the reporters clamored for answers, she composed herself with remarkable speed. Smoothing her dress, she stepped back to the microphone and addressed the crowd. "While Margaret's accusations may seem damning, they are based on fabricated evidence," she announced coolly. Then, to my horror, she produced recordings of me bribing people to testify against her. My blood ran cold as realization dawned. Clara had been playing me all along. Edward stared at me, betrayal etched across his face. "Mom, is this true?" he asked, his voice breaking. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain that I'd acted out of desperation, out of love for this house? All I could manage was a whispered, "I did it for us." The room spun around me as the weight of my actions crashed down like a tidal wave. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed relentlessly, and Clara stood triumphant, her composure unshaken. Edward's face was a mixture of anger and heartbreak, his eyes searching mine for answers I couldn't give. "Mom," he said quietly, pulling me aside as the chaos unfolded, "how could you do this? This isn't who we are." His voice cracked on the last word, and it cut deeper than any accusation from Clara ever could. I wanted to tell him that I had done it for us, for the legacy of this house, but the words felt hollow now. Instead, I nodded mutely, tears streaming down my cheeks. Clara didn't gloat, she didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes as she guided Edward back toward the crowd, leaving me alone in the corner of the ballroom. I watched as reporters began packing up, their interest waning once the scandal lost its shock value. The estate, once a symbol of pride, now felt like a crumbling monument to my failures. In the days that followed, the household fell into an uneasy truce. Clara avoided me entirely, retreating to her wing of the house with Edward by her side. They whispered late into the nights, their voices muffled behind closed doors. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of them walking together in the garden, heads bowed in conversation. It was clear they were rebuilding their relationship without me. At least that's how it felt. Mrs. Pembroke and James distanced themselves too, unsure whether to stand by me after everything had come to light. The loneliness gnawed at me, but worse still was the guilt. I replayed every decision, every act of sabotage, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Had I been so blinded by my need to protect the estate that I failed to see the damage I was causing? One afternoon, while sitting in the library nursing a cup of tea, Clara walked in unexpectedly. For a moment we simply stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally she broke the silence. "You really hate me, don't you?" she asked, her tone surprisingly soft. "It's not about hating you," I replied, setting my teacup down. "It's about protecting what matters to me." She sighed, sinking into the chair opposite mine. "And what if what matters to me is different? Does that make me wrong?" Over the next few weeks, Claire and I found ourselves crossing paths more often. Not out of choice but necessity. With Edward temporarily staying in the city to clear his head, the responsibility of managing the estate fell largely on us. At first our interactions were strained and awkward, filled with terse exchanges about budgets and repairs. But slowly something shifted. One morning, as we reviewed plans for the orchard restoration, Clara surprised me by saying, "I never wanted to erase your history here, Margaret. I just wanted to add to it." Her words caught me off guard, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Later that day, I found myself showing her old family photo albums. Pictures of Edward as a child playing in the gardens, holiday gatherings in the ballroom, even my wedding day under the gazebo. To my surprise, Clara listened intently, asking questions and sharing stories of her own childhood in Brooklyn. For all her ambition and polish, there was a part of Clara that longed for connection, a truth I hadn't considered before. And perhaps, buried beneath my resentment, I had been longing for the same thing. Just when it seemed like things might improve, disaster struck again. A violent storm swept through the region, battering the estate with relentless winds and torrential rain. By morning, the East Wing, the very section Clara had planned to renovate, was flooded, its foundation weakened beyond repair. As we assessed the damage together, standing ankle-deep in water, Clara turned to me with a look of defeat. "This is it, isn't it?" she murmured. "The end of everything." But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt only sadness. This wasn't just her failure, it was ours. Together we called contractors, organized cleanup efforts, and worked tirelessly alongside Mrs. Pembroke and James to salvage what we could. In those moments, the lines between us blurred. We weren't adversaries anymore. We were two women fighting to save the same home. By the time the storm passed, something profound had changed. We no longer saw each other as enemies but as reluctant allies bound by circumstance, and maybe, just maybe, something deeper. Weeks later, Edward returned to the estate looking weary but resolute. He called us both into the study, where he delivered news that neither of us anticipated. He was selling the property. "I've thought long and hard about this," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "This house has become a battleground, a source of pain for all of us. It's time to let go, to start fresh somewhere else." Clara looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. As for me, I felt the floor drop out from beneath me. Selling the estate? The idea was unthinkable, unbearable. But as I glanced at Edward's determined expression, I realized he was right. Afterward, Clara and I sat together in the garden, watching the sun set over the orchard. "Do you think he'll be happy?" she asked softly. "I hope so," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "He deserves to be free of this place, if only because it's brought us nothing but misery." With the sale pending, Clara and I threw ourselves into preparing the estate for its new owners. It was bittersweet work, packing away generations of memories, deciding which pieces of furniture to keep and which to leave behind. One evening, as we sorted through boxes in the attic, Clara paused, holding up a delicate music box. "This was yours, wasn't it?" she asked, turning it over in her hands. "Yes," I admitted, smiling faintly. "My mother gave it to me on my wedding day." Without hesitation, Clara handed it to me. "Keep it," she said simply. "Some things shouldn't be sold." Her gesture moved me more than I cared to admit. Over the following days, we continued working side by side, sharing laughter and tears as we unpacked decades of history. Slowly, the walls between us crumbled, not entirely but enough to let light in. The day of the sale arrived too quickly. Moving trucks lined the driveway, their open backs swallowing pieces of furniture, boxes of mementos, and fragments of a life I'd built over decades. Watching it all disappear felt like losing a limb. It was painful, raw, and irreversible. Clara surprised me by staying close throughout the process. She helped direct movers, packed fragile items with care, and even insisted on driving me into town when I needed supplies. At one point, as we stood in the empty ballroom, she turned to me and said, "It's strange, isn't it? This place feels so big, but now it feels hollow." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Hollow wasn't quite the right word. It felt more like an echo chamber, amplifying every memory, every loss. Still, there was something comforting about having Clara beside me during those final hours. Her presence reminded me that endings weren't always solitary, they could be shared. On the morning after the sale closed, Clara and I sat together on the front porch for the last time, watching the sun rise over the estate. The new owners, a young family with 2 boisterous children, were due to arrive later that day. Their laughter would soon fill these halls, replacing the silence left behind by our departure. I never thought I'd say this, Clara admitted, breaking the quiet, but I'll miss this place. Not because of what it was, but because of what it became, for both of us. Her words caught me off guard and I found myself nodding in agreement. Over the past few months, the estate had transformed from a battleground into a bridge. A way for two women who couldn't have been more different to find common ground. Where will you go? I asked her finally, curiosity getting the better of me. Clara smiled faintly. Edward and I are thinking of starting fresh somewhere smaller. Maybe near the coast. Somewhere simple. And you? She added, turning to me. I hesitated, then shrugged. I'm not sure yet. But wherever it is, I think it's time I stopped clinging to the past. Before leaving, Clara handed me a small envelope. Inside was a key attached to a note. For the gatehouse. Keep it safe. Confused, I looked at her. What's this? It's yours, she explained. We arranged with the buyers to let you keep the gatehouse. It's not much, but it's still part of the estate, and it's yours if you want it. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the enormity of her gesture. The gatehouse wasn't just a building. It was a lifeline. A connection to everything I'd fought so hard to preserve. Thank you, I whispered, my voice trembling. Clara smiled, her own eyes glistening. No thanks needed. Call it a peace offering. In the weeks that followed, I settled into the gatehouse, its cozy interior a stark contrast to the grandeur of the main estate. It was humbling yet oddly liberating. For the first time in years I felt untethered, not lost but free. I spent my days tending to the garden, writing letters to old friends, and occasionally visiting Edward and Clara in their new home by the sea. Each visit brought a sense of healing, a reminder that forgiveness, even for ourselves, is possible. One evening as I sat on the porch sipping tea, I reflected on how far we'd come. What began as a war of wills had ended in an unlikely friendship. Clara and I were never going to see eye to eye on everything, but perhaps that was the beauty of it. Our differences had forced us to grow, to adapt, to become better versions of ourselves. And though the estate no longer belonged to me, I carried its spirit within me. That, I realized, was the true legacy. Months later, I received an invitation to the new owner's annual summer party. Hesitant at first, I decided to attend, curious to see how the estate had changed under their care. Walking through the familiar grounds, I marveled at the blend of old and new. The orchard had been replanted, the gardens revitalized, and the ballroom restored to its former glory. Yet traces of the past remained. The chandeliers, the gazebo, the music box sitting proudly on a side table. As I mingled with guests, I noticed Clara standing nearby, chatting animatedly with the homeowners. When she spotted me, she excused herself and made her way over. You came, she said, grinning. Of course, I replied. This place will always be a part of me. We stood there for a moment, taking it all in, the laughter, the music, the sense of renewal. Then Clara looped her arm through mine, pulling me gently toward the crowd. Come on, she said. Let's dance. For the first time in years I laughed, not out of obligation or bitterness but pure joy. That night as I walked back to the gatehouse under a canopy of stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. The estate had taught me many things over the years. Resilience, pride, love, and loss. But most importantly, it had taught me that legacies aren't confined to walls or land. They live in the people we touch, the relationships we nurture, and the lessons we carry forward. Clara and I may have started as adversaries, but we ended as allies, bound not by blood, but by the shared experience of letting go. And though the house was no longer mine, its story continued, woven into the lives of those who called it home. I am Margaret Hargrove, I thought as I unlocked the door to the gatehouse, and though my reign has ended, my legacy lives on.